So in today's video, we are going to be discussing LeSean McCoy calling out Eric Bieniemy. Now, before we get into the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's jump right into the video. So with this situation with LeSean McCoy and Eric Bieniemy, there's a lot of different directions that you could take this conversation. I think there's a lot of viewpoints that could be valid in this situation, and it also could just be a player that was just really upset with the way that his career was coming to an end and the way that the team handled his situation late in his career. So I do really think that there is a lot of different ways you can take this story, because for me personally, I'm a Chiefs fan, but when it comes to off the field things like this and deeper meaning, I'm usually not one to pay attention too much to it. I'm more of an on the field, watch the game type of person. I'm not usually big into off the field issues as much. It can be fascinating, it can be interesting, but it's just not really my strong suit. But when it pertains to the Chiefs, in a way, this story is very interesting because I think there is a way that you could take both sides of this. So LeSean McCoy, he played for Kansas City in the 2019-2020 season, the season that the Chiefs ended up making the Super Bowl and beating the 49ers that year. And in Kansas City, LeSean McCoy, like we said, he was later in his career, so he didn't have that big of a role in the Kansas City offense. First, the Chiefs really aren't a run-first offense. The Chiefs really don't run the football. So that immediately is going to diminish the kind of role that LeSean McCoy ever played for the Chiefs. Like with the Chiefs not running the football very much, LeSean McCoy instantly was already going to have a diminished role. And Damian Williams was the starting running back that year. Damian Williams was hurt parts of that season, so LeSean McCoy did get to play a little bit more there with that situation with Damian Williams getting hurt. But overall, the Chiefs obviously weren't a run-first offense. The Chiefs split the snaps between Damian Williams and LeSean McCoy. Neither of them passed 500 yards that season, so neither one of them were really making that big of an impact when it came to the ground game. And Damian Williams, when he was playing, just seemed to be a bigger factor on the football field to begin with. And for what it's worth, LeSean McCoy did have a bunch of problems with running the football. The way that LeSean McCoy held the football was very frustrating to watch. Like, that's pretty easy to look at if you're watching the games. The way that McCoy held the football was infuriating most of the time. And also, he had a massive fumbling issue. He had an issue with securing the football because of the way he ran it. And I think that fumble he had against the Packers in 2019 really solidified his role with the Chiefs, and that he really wasn't going to have that big of a role with the Chiefs, because later in that season, McCoy was inactive for the final two games of the regular season. He was active during the divisional round against the Texans, but he only played one snap, and the rest of the playoffs he was inactive with the Chiefs, and he didn't play in the AFC Championship game against the Titans, and he also didn't play in the Super Bowl. He was inactive. The Chiefs decided to only have two running backs on the roster with Darwin Thompson, Damian Williams, and then they wanted to use that extra roster spot for a different position on the team, allow for more depth at different positions on the football field. So obviously LeSean McCoy in Kansas City wasn't that big of a factor when it came to the on the field to begin with. Like we said, he was a vet late in his career, but I think the comments that LeSean McCoy made about Eric Bieniemy was the fact that he was late in his career and the fact that he wasn't getting much playing time. Because LeSean McCoy said that Eric Bieniemy talked to players in a way that some would accept the way he talked to, but that LeSean McCoy would not accept the way that Eric Bieniemy was talking to him. And then he also said that the way that Eric Bieniemy talked to players was probably the reason why Eric Bieniemy never got a head coaching job in the NFL yet. And so you could chalk that up to a few things. And there's a lot of different routes you could take with the comments that McCoy made. One, you could argue that LeSean McCoy was just kind of upset that he wasn't getting much playing time in Kansas City and that he was just disgruntled, and that with not getting much playing time, he wanted to point fingers at somebody. Because if we look at the way Eric Bieniemy has coached, Eric Bieniemy has never kind of shied away from the way that he coaches. Like, even Andy Reid points out that Eric Bieniemy will push players, get the max out of players. He will say things that players may not want to hear. He'll say things that players do want to hear. But at the end of the day, Eric Bieniemy is going to push players to get the most out of them and make them play the best that they possibly can. And McCoy, being a veteran in the NFL, maybe that's not what he wanted to hear, and he probably took it the wrong way. I don't think that really Eric Bieniemy had any malicious intent behind anything he does, because I just think that he's a good coach, and a coach that wants to get the most out of his players. He is a good coach, I do think, but I just think the way that he talks to them, it's not to be demeaning. I think it's just a way to get the most out of players. Now, if LeSean McCoy is saying goes deeper and it's just not just McCoy, in a way, that could be also a problem why Bieniemy's not getting a head coaching job, because with Kansas City and the way the team is structured, Eric Bieniemy can be as hard as he possibly wants. He can upset players, and I'm not saying he can as in he should. I'm saying, his actions and the way he talks to the players may upset some of the players. But with Andy Reid as the head coach, it really doesn't matter what Eric Bieniemy says. If Eric Bieniemy upsets players, players will go to Andy Reid. And because Andy Reid is just so good at what he does, Andy Reid is so good at just controlling situations, not letting things get out of hand, that if there really was an issue in Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy and his coaching style and the way that he was talking to players, the buck stops with Andy Reid. So in a way, the coaching issues, the culture issues inside of the Chiefs really aren't going to be that big of a problem, because you have a guy like Andy Reid that can stop those players. Now with Eric Bieniemy and him not getting a head coaching job, that also could be a factor in the way that he coaches players, like McCoy said, and that, the way he talks to players as a coordinator. It'll work as an offensive coordinator. It'll work as a coordinator in the NFL, but as a head coach in the NFL, that may not work. The way that he talks to players as a coordinator will work in that position, but as a head coach, there's other aspects of the team that you have to be able to talk to, control, and maybe put teams see that and are like, okay, the way he talks to players isn't necessarily the best thing to go by. And I mean, we even had that hit piece that was written earlier this offseason. Now, there's probably no truth to that whatsoever. There is people saying out there that hit piece was possibly written because of what LeSean McCoy said. LeSean McCoy himself could have been the source for that story. We really do not know, because it said that Eric Bieniemy has an ego, and that, him and Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes weren't getting along after the AFC Championship game against the Cincinnati Bengals. But at the same time, the timelines don't necessarily add up, because McCoy was gone before the AFC Championship game even happened. So we really don't know if any of that's really true. It would be really hard to say that it is, but that's just another thing out there. That hit piece came out, but again, it could have just been a fan writing it. We really do not know really how much truth is into that story. But at the same time, it's really hard to also take LeSean McCoy's side fully. It's really hard to pick sides on this completely, because Andy Reid all but admits that, Eric Bieniemy is a hard coach. He says that he'll push players, try to get the best out of him, but he also mentions that Eric Bieniemy also really likes the players, and the players seem to like Eric Bieniemy. Like, we've seen Travis Kelce get into it with Eric Bieniemy, and it seems to blow over. Nothing really comes of it. We've seen, Patrick Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy work well together. That hit piece came out about Eric Bieniemy, and Tyreek Hill even kind of went to the defense of Eric Bieniemy. So the situation is kind of rough, because on one hand, you could kind of understand why Eric Bieniemy doesn't get a head coaching job is because of maybe the way he talks to players. And if we're talking about on the field, the lack of adjustments last season, and then the way the AFC Championship game went, with Eric Bieniemy running the offensive side of the ball, that could have hindered teams and took away his stock as possibly becoming a head coach, just the way that the AFC Championship game went and all of that. But then you also have to look at the fact that Eric Bieniemy is a very smart head coach. He knows what he's doing on the offensive side of the ball. So at some point, he's going to deserve a head coaching job. But his time in Kansas City looks like it's going to be close to being up. He signed a one-year deal with the Chiefs. He's back for only this year. So really, this is probably his last year in Kansas City. He was with the Chiefs for 4 years. Now, he did lead the Chiefs to having one of the best offenses in the entire NFL those 4 years. So obviously, Eric Bieniemy knows what he's doing. It just may become a style that players don't like, and veteran players especially don't like, because from all accounts, Mahomes just may be that mature of a quarterback that he can handle that kind of coaching, and he's just that good of a teammate. So maybe it's just LeSean McCoy being petty that he didn't get a play. It also could be the fact that it is true, but a lot of players take it much better than LeSean McCoy can take those comments. But, Eric Bieniemy helped the Chiefs become a dynamic, great offense for 4 years in his time in Kansas City. This is probably his last year with Matt Nagy coming back to Kansas City. So the offensive side of the ball, not only is it changing with the guys on the field, the coaching staff itself might be starting to change here soon as well. So this is really a good year for Eric Bieniemy, just to shut everybody up. Go out there, help the team be successful, because everybody likes to knock Eric Bieniemy that he had Patrick Mahomes, that he had Travis Kelce, that he had Tyreek Hill. Well, Tyreek Hill's gone now, and the Chiefs have an entire new wide receiving core. Yeah, Travis Kelce's still there, Patrick Mahomes is still there, but you lose a guy like Tyreek Hill, and you have to rebuild the entire wide receiver room, with Mecole Hardman really being the only guy that was still there from last season. This is a good year for Eric Bieniemy to just shut everybody up, because it's an entirely different squad out there. So if Eric Bieniemy wants a head coaching job, this is the year to go out there and take it. Now, if it's true that it's because of Mahomes being there and the talent that was around Mahomes, the way that the Chiefs organization drafted in, the way that they, are just really good at staying consistent with the talent that they bring in, the best bet for Eric Bieniemy is probably to go to another team. There's people saying go to the Patriots, work with Bill Belichick, go there, go to a team that needs an offensive coordinator, a team that needs an offense that needs to be better on that side of the ball. There's a lot of ways for Eric Bieniemy to get a head coaching job. And based off the LeSean McCoy comments, it feels like we almost didn't learn anything new, because we know Eric Bieniemy is kind of a hard coach. I mean, he literally says it in a press conference a couple years ago about Patrick Mahomes. He uses some very, strong language to describe Patrick Mahomes. So I just think Eric Bieniemy is a tough head coach. And even as a Chiefs fan, it's really hard for me to have a full-on opinion of this situation, because I like to stick to on the field. Would prefer not to look at the off-the-field issues. The furthest I like to criticize a coaching staff is I think the Chiefs coaching staff absolutely failed the Chiefs when it came to the AFC Championship game and the way that they handled that situation. That's just my opinion. So when it comes to off-the-field stuff, I'm not really versed as much as some other people. But when it comes to Eric Bieniemy, when it comes to the Chiefs, when it comes to LeSean McCoy, my really only opinion of this entire thing is that LeSean McCoy was just kind of angry that he didn't get much playing time later in his career in Kansas City, and he kind of pointed the fingers at Eric Bieniemy instead of just taking accountability that, hey, it's later in my career and things aren't going the way that I want them to go. But those are just my thoughts on Eric Bieniemy getting called out by LeSean McCoy. Again, I'm a Chiefs fan and I could still be completely wrong about this situation, but these are just my opinions, the way I see it from my standpoint as a Chiefs fan. And it's really tough for me to have a full-on opinion about this, because I like Eric Bieniemy. I think he deserves a head coach, but if any of this is true, it's going to be tough. But give me your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next one.